It's Breakfast Extra and you're welcome back. Now on Tuesday, a few hours after organized labor in Nigeria suspended the two-day strike, President Bola Tinubu directed the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, to present the cost implication for a new minimum wage within 2 days. President Tinubu gave the order at a meeting with the government negotiation team led by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, at the presidential villa in Abuja, the nation's capital. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, disclosed this in an interview with pressmen after the closed-door meeting on Tuesday.
Now, fast forward to Thursday, Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, along with the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Atiku Ogudu, presented President Tinubu with the cost implications of the new minimum wage in his office at the presidential villa in Abuja on Thursday. Now, recall that organized labor comprising the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress had embarked on a nationwide strike on Monday to demand an increased minimum wage for workers and the reversal of the recently increased electricity tariffs. However, the labor union leadership suspended the strike on Tuesday for 5 days after signing a commitment with the federal government to resume negotiations and come up with the new minimum wage within a week.
Now, the submission of the cost implications for a new minimum wage, however, triggered speculations that the finance minister proposed 105,000 naira in the new minimum wage template. On Thursday, the special advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, punctured this claim in a post on his X account. He wrote, "The Honorable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, has not proposed 105,000 naira minimum wage. The contrary story being disseminated is false." Now, meanwhile, the meeting of the Tripartite Committee on National Minimum Wage was again adjourned till Friday, that's yesterday, due to the unavailability of the cost template.
Now, on Friday, the Nigeria Governors Forum, NGF, warned that implementing the proposed 60,000 naira monthly minimum wage would push back many states into financial ruin, crippling their ability to fund critical development projects and even basic services. Now, the governors stated this in a statement by the Acting Director, Media and Public Affairs of the Nigeria Governors Forum, Ajiya Halima Saliu Ahmed. Now, saying governors across the country sympathize with labor unions pushing for higher wages. However, she cautioned that the 60,000 naira figure is simply unsustainable given the financial realities facing most states. And so joining us to discuss Nigeria's anticipation of an agreed figure for the national minimum wage is Emeka Obegolu. He is the senior advocate of Nigeria and President Abuja Chambers of Commerce and Industry. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Now, on Tuesday, President Bola Tinubu directed the Minister of Finance, from our intro, and Wale Edun, who's the Minister of Finance, by the way, to present the cost implication for a new minimum wage within 2 days. Could there be implications in terms of omissions or oversight to the meeting? That was within the period, it was a 48-hour deadline. Could there have been something that was missed within that time frame?
Well, because we're discussing a national minimum wage, it's expected that there should be decision makers in the room. The president has shown good faith by requesting for cost implication. And recall that I said on Tuesday that every obligation of government must be benchmarked with sustainability index. Now, government cannot borrow to pay minimum wage. But for me, what the president has done is to seek input from the technocrats to know what the government can pay. What is the cost implication? Now, we learned that the cost implication has been submitted to the president. But the challenge now is that the decision makers were not in the room when labor was promised minimum of 60,000 naira. And you now see the state governors coming out to say that, look, hey, we cannot even pay 60,000 naira. And that is a challenge, because if you are prescribing a national minimum wage, it means the states and the local governments and even the private sector will be bound by the national minimum wage. In an ideal scenario, when the national minimum wage is prescribed and made a law, the states can also on their own benchmark the minimum wage. States like Lagos is not expected to pay what states like Sokoto or Enugu is paying. The cost of living in states differ and they vary. So what the national minimum wage should prescribe is the lowest benchmark for payment of minimum wage. Now, the state governments are saying that even at that, even what the president has, as it were, promised, that we cannot even pay it. So this presents a different challenge. And that is why in negotiation, it's always good to have all the decision makers in the room when promises are made. How they will work through this is now a bigger problem. But I think, like I said on Tuesday, that everybody negotiating, whether for labor or for government, should in this country negotiate in good faith. The labor knows what states can pay. They are the bureaucracy of the states. Governments say that we cannot pay 60,000 naira minimum wage. I think the labor should dig up data from the states where they are the bureaucrats to show what each state can pay. So,
all right, so Mr. Emeka, we hear you on that one, and that's very true. I mean, Labour also has to bring up data as well. But then again, during the discussions, presenting this to the president was the Finance Minister, Wale Edun, and also the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Atiku Bagudu. I mean, these are essential ministries or ministers that ought to have the responsibility in making these decisions. Wouldn't you say that that suffices for, well, the policymakers being in the room like you spoke of earlier?
When you're practicing federalism, it appears to me that each state is independent within the federal structure. What Anambra State can pay as minimum wage should depend on the number of civil servants working in Anambra State and the income generated by the state. If you add that to the federal allocation, you can now begin to identify what Anambra can pay. So it appears to me that the federal government may not be able to appreciate what Anambra or Ekiti State or Sokoto State will be able to pay as minimum wage. Now, when you have a federal structure as we have, and you're discussing national minimum wage, it's important that the state governors and even the be represented in the room so that what decision is taken can bind them. You cannot bind a man who is not in the room where the decision is taken. So now this challenge has come. Labour and of course federal government must bring in the state governments or the state governors. And in my view, the local governments represented by whatever structure they have to sit down and negotiate for a fair wage for workers. You see, until good faith is implemented, we can continue going round, but they will never come up with a solution that addresses this issue. It's an existential threat for workers. And I appeal to everybody who is involved in this to quit gerrymandering. Let us address this core issue head on and get away with this phase. There are other issues confronting the government. As it were now, we have been distracted by a labor dispute, which is avoidable. So the way to go is to bring in all the decision makers and deal with this once and for all.
Now, many states, which is, of course, the Nigerian Governors Forum, they've all lamented that a 60,000 naira minimum wage will mean financial ruin for those states. And the statement was made by the Publicity Secretary for the forum. What do you make of this move? Do you think that it will indeed plunge many of the states in ruin? And why was this not even considered during the negotiations or when, Wale Edun and the secretary as well was, submitting their blueprint or their template for a new minimum wage?
Well, my understanding of states in Nigeria, a lot of state governments are running an opaque system. Within the state, nobody knows what comes in and how it is spent. So these are issues of hard facts. What is your allocation? What is your staff strength? What is the bureaucracy in your state? How does it work? Recall that when we came to 30,000. A lot of states also lamented that they are unable to pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. Yet, when it was made a law, they all paid it. Now we have come again. Somewhere down the line, the revenue generation from FAC has tripled within the May 29th of last year to this current May 29th. Their revenue has tripled. How can they say that they cannot pay 60,000 naira minimum wage? It baffles me. But again, it is not for me to speculate. These are issues that will be based on facts and figures. Let them come to labor. Luckily, labor works. Labor is the bureaucracy of these states. It's for labor to challenge each state that says I cannot pay. Bring out data, bring out facts to show that the state can pay. And I think if Labor Department of Research is still working, this is time for them to show that they know what they're asking for.
So, Mr. Emeka, we hear plenty from the federal government, the presidency in this case, and we also hear plenty from Labour, who are at the moment proposing 250,000 and above for minimum wage. But there seems to be very little representation of the private sector. No one is hearing whether they're good with the 60,000 naira or whether they aren't. What do you make of this instance here regarding the private sector and their silence on this matter?
Well, the private sector, of course, will work with any agreement that the government reaches. As a private sector operator, in my business, we pay above the minimum wage. I don't think any private sector, particularly in the big cities, will have any challenge paying the minimum wage. But then again, that is why we talk about city-based or state-based minimum wage. Even within the state, even within a state, like in my state, Anambra, what you pay in Onitsha may be unaffordable for some communities in my state. So labor negotiation, when you get to the federal or national minimum wage, if you get to the states, you benchmark from there and begin to reflect the realities on ground in different states. The economic power is not nationally stable. It's not equitably spread across our geographic space. So it's going to also involve a lot of negotiation within the states to find what works for everybody. But as a private sector operative, I believe that whatever government agrees is the national minimum wage, the private sector will be obligated to implement it.
Now, you just said something which is very important, almost pertinent there about, that means the governors have to now come to the table in terms of negotiations. And so now if we're looking at a new minimum wage, which would be a unified number, what would you propose that should be that will be standardized across, all 36 states, plus the FCT and the private sector as well?
Well, remember on Tuesday, I prescribed anything between 100,000 and 150,000. I still believe that in terms of a living wage, that can address not all the issues a family will face in a month, in 30 days, but at least reflects the challenges and the rising inflation and the cost of living in Nigeria today. Whether government can afford it is a different thing. But I think minimum wage shouldn't be below 100,000 naira.
Okay, now to that end, if you propose somewhere between 100 and 150,000 naira, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's inflation. This will still have an effect on inflation whether we like it or not. What do you propose that the government, maybe policies or something else, that the government embark upon to help make sure that inflation doesn't become the next thing we're talking about, or we're already talking about it in any case, but so it doesn't get any higher?
Well, on inflation, you will find that it's a vicious cycle. Over the years, we've seen clearly that until we have a stable value of our currency, we cannot arrest inflation. Why do I say this? If we must peg Naira at some point, floating your national currency when you do not export anything but oil is not going to help Nigeria. We have floated the national currency since May 29th last year, and national currency crumbled. At some point, the government had to come back to at least try to induce the market by selling dollar at controlled market price. Now, it appears that there's some form of stability. But even at that, we do not know how this will last. And that is why, because we're an import-dependent country, everything we utilize in this country basically imported. Importers are hedging their bets on expensive dollar. So when they come in, for every import we bring in, custom is charging dollar at black market rate for import duty. Everybody is dollar dependent. So in a dollar dependent economy, it is really difficult to control inflation until you have a stable exchange rate. We are not producing anything. And government has also not done enough to support the productive sector of the economy. Just yesterday, in my congratulatory message to the Minister of FCT for the wonderful work he's been doing with regards to infrastructure, I called his attention to the Idu Industrial District in the Federal Capital Territory, which is supposed to be the industrial base of the FCT. But if you go to Idu Industrial District, there are no roads. Power is almost non-existent. Water is a mirage. How can an economy such as ours not support industrialization? So if you come to FCT, you have the fine streets in the city center, street lights, everything working. But the base, the industrial base of the city is neglected. And you want to control inflation. So apart from dealing with the value of our currency, we must take deliberate efforts and deliberate steps to support industrialization. We have been mouthing a lot of issues. We have to support this, but we are not showing it on ground. I use Idu Industrial District as an example. What do you do there? People now do land speculation with industrial plots of land.
Now, towing the same line of, apologies to call you there, but towing the same line of supporting industrialization of our economy, one of the things that the organized labor unions embarked on was to demand for a decrease or reversal of the recently increased, electricity tariffs. And many have argued that, many critics and analysts have argued that the overtaxation doubled with fuel subsidy removal, which in turn meant increase in price of fuel, as well as, not to forget, the overtaxation that we're seeing in these sectors. Do you think that, the government should start to factor the reversal of, electricity tariff in? Because when you think about it, it sort of impacts industrialization, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. But you see, most industries in Nigeria do not even depend on the national grid again because it's non-existent. So when you talk about electricity tariff, if you go to most industrial districts, you find that they are generating their own power. So they don't even have a feel of the national grid. Definitely, a lot of policies of this present administration has eaten deep into the purchasing power of Nigerians. Whether we should reverse the electricity tariff increase or leave it as it is a question for the technocrats to decide. For me, there must be ways for government to support the businesses in Nigeria. Electricity tariff has been justified by governments by claims that it will attract investment into the electricity sector. Fine. We await the investment, we have not seen it. Meanwhile, people are paying beyond their means to have light. And what it does for us now is that those who can afford it are moving their properties off grid. They are using alternative means to generate power for their properties. And very soon you find that even in the band A, which was promised 20 hours of light a day, they don't have 6-7 hours in most cities. And for those of us in Abuja who may enjoy some good power supply, if you go to Enugu, if you go to other states, you find that band A don't get 6 hours of power a day. You go to most states in Nigeria, they don't have it. So what is the justification for bifurcating your customers into band A and band B when there is nothing different apart from the power to pay, as you assume it? Because the fact that I live in Asokoro or Maitama may not necessarily translate into my ability to pay what band A customer could pay. I may be staying in my official residence. So all these are speculators, speculation that has not worked. We have not seen increased power supply.
All right.
We have not seen efficiency in the electricity industry, and we are where we are.
Mr. Emeka, thank you so much for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming on and just discussing this very crucial matter as it pertains every Nigerian and our nation at large.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.